Welcome to the Help and Hope podcast produced by Mark Inc. Ministries, where it is our vision to offer resources designed to help turn your heart toward Jesus. We are so excited, my co-host Heidi Nequist and I'm Sharon Betters, to welcome to the podcast today Elyse Fitzpatrick, because we are going to be talking about a topic that touches millions and millions of people. And we are praying that this conversation is going to maybe give you a little different perspective on aging and what it means to walk that pathway that is, unless God takes us home at an early age, it is there for all of us. I first met Elyse when she wrote a review for my book, Treasures in Darkness. And since then, I read her book, The Afternoon of Life, 20 years ago. This is not the 20-year-old book. This is the new book that her publisher, P&R, has just released. It's a revised and expanded version to reflect what it means to age through the afternoon of life into the next season. And I've read it, and I love it even more than the first one. And I think what's going to make our conversation even more effective is that Heidi is around the same age I was when I read the first edition. So she's in the afternoon of life. And of course, I'm way ahead of her. I am in the twilight. And I think Lise might be in between. So it will be fun to see which season gets the most time. Elise has written over 20 books, and I have a bunch of them on my shelf. She is a mother, a grandmother, a wife. She is a counselor. And I know that God has touched many, many lives throughout her life, and I am one of them. And Elyse, it is so fun for me to have you on our podcast, and I'm so eager for us to jump into our conversation. So welcome.
Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you. Those are very kind words.
So I'm going to jump right in with our first question. And my mom alluded to this, that you wrote the first edition of The Afternoon of Life about 20 years ago. So it was released in 2004. You updated it recently through the grid of living through the afternoon of life and moving on into the evening of life. Why did you write the first edition? And is there anything you wish you had included the first time that you ended up putting in the second time?
Thank you. Thanks. That's a great question. So I wrote the book the first time really for the reason that I've pretty much written all the books that I've written, which is because I need some help and I can't find the book I need. So
Mm,
I'm going to write one.
mm,
Mm.
Um,
mm,
so if you look at sort of my body of work, you can tell. All right, well, that was when Elise was struggling with this, and that was when she was asking this question. So originally, the book was for me because I pretty much do everything for me, and then if other people are blessed by it, well, that's great.
That's a
Um,
beautiful thing.
so yeah, the book was originally written for myself as I was really struggling with some of the issues that we talk about in the afternoon of life. Particularly, I remember, for instance, the changes in my body and the changes in the makeup of my home.
mm,
Mm.
So, I had those questions. And that I wanted to answer. And so what I did was I drew together a group of friends who were all pretty much my age and asked them, "Hey, what's this like for you? Talk to me about this particular topic." And I, I, I really, one of the things I love about the book is that there's so many different voices. It's not just me. And then what did I wish I had put in the book? Well, uh, at the time that I wrote the book, um, I wasn't really thinking about widowhood,
Mm.
and I'm not there now. Thank
mm,
God. But I think that was really a missing piece,
Hmm.
because there were women, I'm quite sure, who needed to somebody to sort of walk with them a little bit through what was going on in their life. And actually, one of the women that I first wrote with, as I began my writing career, was a woman who at that time was a widow. And quite honestly, it never occurred to me that I should have had her write,
Mm.
because, uh, I tend to not notice what I
Mm,
should notice. And then in this book, we've added a chapter
Mm.
for women who are walking through life as a widow,
Mm.
which was something new for them.
mm,
So there was no manual for you, so you wrote your own.
mm,
Pretty much. That's
Yeah.
well,
Love that.
mm,
that's, yes, it's sort of how I've lived. If I can't easily, and I just want to say this up front. That doesn't mean that there wasn't anything like this out there. It
Mhm.
was just I couldn't find it easily.
Mhm.
Um, so if I couldn't find an easy answer, or an answer easily, I should say, then I decided to do it myself. Pretty much what I've
mm,
done my whole life.
mm. When I was in my 20s, my husband was a pastor, young pastor going to seminary, so you can imagine,
Yeah.
how ill-equipped we were, but I had, the experience of teaching a Bible study. Who did I think I was?
Yeah.
And it was an old city church, and it was a dying city church, and it was mostly elderly people, but there were 5 what I considered elderly women who would come to my house every single week to learn from me,
Mhm.
which was so gracious of them.
Yeah.
What a beautiful picture to me of
Yeah.
aging with grace, for real. But then also in the church, there were elderly women who were not really nice. They would tell me about how my husband was this and that, and the whole deal. It was really quite unnecessary, but it
Mm.
gave me 2 roads. And I knew then I did not want to become a bitter old woman.
Mm.
So I did have that in the back of my head throughout the years. But I, when you're that age, you're not thinking really of being old. And you're
Right.
not thinking while you're raising a family or your career or whatever that one day I'm going to be old. Most of us aren't thinking that way. And yet, in your first book, you talk about we need to prepare for this season of life with just as much gusto as we prepare for those early seasons of life. So, how does your theology, how does anyone's theology make a difference in the way that, if we're serious about preparing for this season of life, make a difference in the way or help you to respond to those changes in life, those hard places of life? I mean, you say in your book at one point, you said, I just decided God is my father, he is sovereign, and he is good. Because what else could you say at that time?
Yes. Yeah.
So, how does our theology make a difference in helping us um, to have a view of aging that is not all doomsday?
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that. Um, I want to encourage women, in particular, people, to at least start to answer questions they may have with understanding about God. God's the first answer.
Mhm,
So knowing what I know about God has helped me walk through difficult changes. So we want to start by saying, okay, what do I know about God? Well, God is sovereign. God does not change. He's what we would call immutable. God is sovereign and does not change. And yet, he's built change into the world. And he built change into the world before the fall. So even before sin entered the world, God had so structured it in wisdom that there was change. There was morning and night. So there was change.
Mm.
So if what I know about God is that he's sovereign and wise, and in his wisdom, he's built change into the world, then that helps. But then it's also really helpful for me to know that not only is God sovereign, but he's also loving. So God is sovereign and wise and loving, because a sovereign God who's not loving is terrifying, right? So he is sovereign and wise, but he's also loving. And so, what that tells me is that as I begin to think about, oh, these changes that are just, they're coming down the pike, but they're more than coming down the pike. They're overwhelming me in some ways. These changes come through the hands of a loving God. Then I have to ask, okay, how is this then? How are the changes that God has structured into the universe, into our lives? How are these changes an example of his love for us? So, again, if God is sovereign, meaning that he rules over all things, and all things are within his power and control. And he's the creator. So if he, by his wisdom, created a world in which change is everywhere, it's ubiquitous, it's all the time changing. And if he's wise, if that's wise for him to do that, and it's loving for him to do that, then I have to ask why. Why are these things good? Why are changes good? And then I realize, I would like to say I've completely realized. No, I'm striving to realize that these changes should serve to make me wise and loving. Sharon, I loved what you said about I don't want to be that bitter old woman. See, because I can be the kind of person that says, "Oh, you're not doing it my way," and
For
that's
real.
yeah,
Yep.
so easy. Or you walk into church and they're playing some song. They're playing some song, that you've sung for the last 50 years, but now they've changed it. How dare
Terrible.
they?
Yeah. Yep.
So from something that's really trivial like that to, wait a minute, how did that just happen? Those kinds of things that we walk through. Then I have to say, okay, God, you're teaching me to be loving, to love others, and you're making me wise. So it all starts with our theology, which I know you know.
But we don't, I think that we have to be reminded of it. I think that's what, all the things that you're saying, I know you would agree, they all require dying to self. They all
Yes.
require saying, okay, God is telling me, don't be snarky here. So how does that look? And it means taking time to think it through and all of those things and dying to self. And it's painful. It
Yeah.
is painful,
Yes.
the changes that he brings into our life. But I appreciate where you say that's the starting point, because we we have to have some foundation. What is the grid
Yes.
through which you view life? And so I think that would take us into the next another topic would be our culture does not encourage us to accept change in aging, especially for women. Now they're going after men, of course, but for women, it's tough because that is not the theology that they are or the worldview that is being poured into us every minute of every day when we are, in social media and all that kind of stuff. So, what are some of the reasons why midlife can be so painful? To that afternoon of life can be so painful for women in our culture.
Yes, and I fully agree with you. We are a youth, beauty, strength, prosperity, health driven culture.
Mhm.
And it doesn't take long if you're on the social media machine at all. It doesn't take long for you to come up against this incessant message. Or if you happen to watch um, television and there's commercials and over and over and over again, the message that you hear is fight against
Mm.
aging.
Mhm.
Don't be that old lady. Don't be an old lady.
Mhm.
And one of my sons, who's I want to say he's in his late 40s, but I have no idea how old my kids are. If you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Um,
Mm.
he said to me, he said, why do women when they start to go gray, why do you dye your hair? He asked me that. Well, I stopped coloring my hair at the pandemic because I thought,
Mm.
meh, okay, that's another thing that's going away. Um, and I said, well, honey, you have no idea the
Mm.
pressure that's on women
Mhm.
to continue to try to look young, um, and look like a trophy wife. Ha
Mm.
ha, that's a joke.
Mm.
But
Mm.
yes, look young. There is this ongoing pressure. And honestly, I think it's driven by fear.
Mm.
Mm.
Isn't it driven by fear? It's this sort of fear that I will become ancillary, redundant.
Mm.
Uns-
Uh, I'm
Mm.
sorry?
unseen.
Mm.
Unseen. Yes, unseen. That's exactly right.
Mhm.
Um, s- and I've had this conversation with friends of mine who are my age, and sometimes we'll be whatever at, let's say we're at a counter or we're at a restaurant or whatever, and I'll look at my friends because we've been being ignored,
Mm.
and I'll look at my friends and say, can you see me?
Mm.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
yes, unseen. It's this unseen, unimportant, silent, no voice, n- n- no no influence,
Mm.
redundancy.
Mhm.
I think if you add to that too, that you where a lot of us found that identity was being moms,
Yes.
Mm.
and the little ones that needed us all the time, and now they don't need us all the time. Well, mine seems
Yeah.
to still need me too much, but but and that becomes another unseen. I'm not, at least I knew my 5 kids, when I walked in the door they would see me, so I think
Right.
that lends to it big time.
Mm.
Absolutely. I completely agree. So for a long time, right, many years, decades, I was trying to do what I thought God wanted me to do, and it was what He wanted me to do,
Mm.
which was uh, help train my children, help raise my children.
Mhm.
Um, but then they went away,
Yeah.
And basically, what they say now is they don't actually say it, but I know they're thinking it. No, thank you. Um,
Is that what you're thinking, Heidi, about
Absolutely
me?
not. No. I wouldn't be here if that was true.
I should say, my daughter is sort of in ministry with me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I shouldn't say they always think that, but when I get this idea about how they should live their lives,
Mm,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
it's kind of
Mhm.
okay, Mom, thanks,
mhm,
Mhm.
thanks, Mom,
But no thanks.
but no
Yeah.
thanks. And
Mhm.
I remember when we took our youngest son, Joel, who's now ordained in the PCA.
Mm.
mm,
When we took Joel to college and dropped him off in the parking lot, uh,
Mm.
I wept.
I would
I
too.
was sitting in the car with Phil, my husband, weeping.
Mhm.
And Phil said, quoting from A League of Their Own, "There's no crying in
uh-huh,
baseball." You know that line.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
Just there's no crying in college. Actually, there is a lot of crying in
Yeah.
college. But
Right.
anyway,
Nice try.
yeah, nice try. Um,
Mhm,
but I had a conversation with a friend that day, and she said, "I don't get it. Why does God call me to pour my life year after year after year into these people only then to have
Mm.
the right thing for them to do then is to walk into their own lives?
Mhm.
Why?" And again, we're back at, well, because he's good and wise and loving and teaches
Change.
me.
Change.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can, Heidi, I'll let you talk next, but I can
sheesh.
top your story about college because when Heidi went into kindergarten, and I'll probably start crying right now about it, I'm sitting in the car crying as we're driving away. My husband actually stopped at the red light and videotaped me, took a movie of me, an 8
Yes.
millimeter movie of me sitting there crying. And he's
Yeah.
saying, "What is
Yeah.
wrong with you?"
What's wrong
But
with
it
you?
goes back to something you said in your book about a quote from Peter Kreeft.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know if I'm saying his name right. And he
Yeah.
says, "Your life is a series of divestitures."
Yeah.
And I thought, it doesn't start when you're old. It
Mm.
starts way back then, where you're preparing them to leave. If you're a parent, you're preparing them to leave. So anyway, Heidi, what were you going to say?
So I want to try to redirect this conversation just a little bit to my generation, which
Hmm.
is the afternoon of life generation, where the book was written. When I started reading this book, I wrote in my journal, it's right here. Reading this book just makes me want to cry. I don't want to be in the afternoon of life, and I don't want to experience these things.
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, though, so that was my initial thought as I'm literally, it says page one in the book, and this is what I wrote as I started reading. But when I finished the book, I realized I'm already there. I'm in
Yeah.
the afternoon of life. I would not have picked up this book to read it because I did not realize that I needed it.
Hmm.
So I want to figure out, how do we take this and get that information. I've been going through menopause. I really
Hmm.
thought I was losing my mind,
Yeah.
and I
Yes.
I mean, I really thought I can't, by the evening, I can't form words.
Yeah.
I want my kids around me, but then when they're around me, I really want them to get away from me. And,
Yes.
I have been afraid of this part of life where it's just me and my husband. And now I crave for it to be just me and my husband
Hmm.
until my kids leave the room. And then, there's
Yeah.
so much confusion. But again, I didn't know I needed this book until I finished reading the book.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So we were talking earlier, you were saying how we need to be prepared. We need to prepare for these things. But often, like, you didn't write the book until you realized, I need somebody to help me with this. So how do we force, so to speak, the conversation when it comes to, I mean, my friends and I joke about menopause and all of that, but we don't go into, I feel crazy, or I don't want my kids around me, but I can't handle them not being around me.
Mm.
Am I making sense? Because,
You
I'm at
absolutely
menopause.
are.
So how do we, I didn't see this book as about a book of aging. You guys both keep talking about that, but that's not what I see when I read it. I don't see that it's about aging. I see that it's about, just where I am right now, and I'm not old.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I
Goodness.
I I get that. Absolutely. And first of all, yes to everything you said about menopause,
Mhm.
perimenopause, menopause. Um, wow. I really thought I was losing my mind.
Yeah.
And I am happy. I'm happy that women are talking more about it
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
and there's a lot more information about it. But how do we help women understand? This isn't necessarily a book about where Sharon and I are.
That's right.
At this is a book about, okay, these are the things that women who are in their 40s, 50s are
Mhm.
going through.
Mhm.
This is a book about that and the kinds of things that you may be wrestling with, and how to see God's goodness
Mhm.
in what you're going through.
Right.
I do want to say, in the original book, we had, I think we had quite a section on menopause.
Mhm.
So much now has come out, and better books have been written
Mm.
about perimenopause, menopause.
Mhm.
We just decided to pull that whole thing out,
Wow.
um, because um, because I'm not an expert on it. I
Mhm.
mean, I lived through it, but
Mhm.
I'm not a physician, and there's so many good resources out there now about menopause in particular, that we just thought it would be better. Okay, we'll just pull this out
Mhm.
and and encourage people to find other better books about it.
Mhm.
However, saying all that, we do talk about the way your body changes.
Right.
And I remember the first time I had a little arthritic little bump on my thumb, and I thought, what is that? Did I hit my thumb with a hammer?
Mm.
Uh. So, what we want to say to women who are in that age bracket, first of all, you're not alone.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there are wise women who have walked through what you're going through, and they're going to help you.
Mm.
And you'll get to the place where you say, okay, yeah, I remember menopause.
Yeah.
you'll
Right.
get
Right.
you'll get to that place.
Mhm.
Elise, I following through with that is in you say that midlife is where many marriages fall apart.
Yeah.
So, what counsel would you give? I think it's a recognition of preparing for this season, of acknowledging, looking around and saying, we need to figure out how to get through this season of midlife. So, what would be some ways that you could suggest for preparing in your 40s, even in your 30s for, okay, life is going to change. The house is going to be empty, or I'm going to retire, or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you prepare for that season?
Again, being intentional, exactly what you were saying. So, being really intentional about building a relationship with my husband, with your husband, your spouse. So what that means is, as much as you can, trying to say, all right, the focus of my life seems as though it's on these children because they take up so much time. They basically take up all the air in the room. But then to say, no, I'm going to push against that, and I'm going to say, all right, before we get way down the pike and the kids are gone and we look at each other and say, I have no idea who you are. And actually, I'm not sure I want to know who you are before we get there, because this is the aside from the first 5 years of marriage, after the children leave home is when the highest incidences of divorce occur. And that's because you're living basically with a stranger, or you've put up with a lot of stuff that you would not normally put up with. You've put up with a lot of stuff and sort of shoved it aside for the sake of the children, but now the children are gone. So, I would recommend, everybody talks about date night. I would I would recommend making sure that you're spending time together, that you're maybe even reading books together, or you have your own things that you enjoy together that don't include the kids, so that you're beginning to build in the little bit of time that you have, little time at the margins, the little bit of time that you have, to begin to say, I want to try to hang on to this relationship, and then try to remember what it was about your spouse that really drew you to him in the beginning, and strive to see it again. I think it's so easy for us to just say, okay, well, here's Phil, and Phil's there, and I don't even really see him. I see all the stuff I have to do with the kids, but I don't see him. So really trying to spend time seeing each other. And I'll say it really is a time issue. It's
You,
intention and time.
you said in your book on page 57, here's the truth about why you've been created and placed in the relationship you're in. It's for your husband's sake. And I read that and I was like, wait a second.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute. But then I dug in to 1 Corinthians 11, 8, and 9 that you quoted. Man does not originate from women, but women from men. For indeed, man was not created for the woman's sake, but the woman for the man's sake. One of the things that was said to me I was in my 40s, my early 40s. My marriage was in trouble. My babies were almost out of their teens. And my brother, who is a pastor, said to me, I see you and Greg marriage should be walking face to face. And he said, and I feel like you have been walking side by side for most of your marriage. And now I feel like you're walking back to back and you don't even see each other. That was in my 40s, and I'm 54 now. And the last 4 years, my husband and I have worked hard to walk every day facing each other. And when we feel like we're not, we say that. We say we're walking. I'm going to get emotional myself, but if I had not heard those words and heeded them, I would have been divorced when my twins turned 18. Because we were not doing what we should have been doing to prepare for this part of our life. We didn't have anything we did together that was fun. We didn't do date nights because we didn't really want to. You know, he had his hobbies, I had mine. I had my friends, he had his job, you know. So
Right.
we just continued to walk further and further and further away from each other. And the thought of having an empty nest and living in the same house with each other was not something that we were looking forward to, and we didn't talk about it. So I can really, you know, I'm not even sure it's appropriate for me to share this. I'm not the podcast guest, you know, but I just think that it's so prevalent in this, you know, your kids one of my kids said to me, I'm almost 18, get a divorce if you're not happy. We're fine. The kids will be fine. They would not have been fine.
Mm.
So I feel so strongly that statement that you make,
Mm.
that it's for your husband's sake. That's why I'm here. I was not here to be a mommy to those kids. Yes, that was one of my jobs, but my husband is until death do we part.
Right.
Mm.
And that's the relationship. It's so easy to say, okay, I'm here for my kids, and that's a good thing. But that's not the lasting, mm, intimate relationship,
Right.
even though we can feel like it is,
Yeah.
because for if for no other reason than that the kids just take up so much of the time
Right.
and energy. They breathe all the air,
Yeah.
so we're so focused on them, and then we forget that really the lasting intimate relationship is the one that we have with our spouse. It reminds me that in the garden, Adam Adam had a need,
Mm-hmm.
and the need was for a strong helper. That word helper there in Genesis
Mm-hmm.
is ezer kenegdo, which basically means uh, a, a strong ally.
Mm-hmm.
So you see, woman was created because there was a need in man for a strong ally,
Mm-hmm.
someone who could come alongside him
Mm-hmm.
and help. And I think that when you get, and your kids are teenagers and maybe they're not driving yet or whatever, and they're running all over the county and you're taking them and all of that business, you forget, hey, there's a person there
Mm-hmm.
that actually God said before the fall, it's not good for him to be alone.
Right.
Why? Because he needs a strong ally.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I can't know, I will not know in what ways he needs a strong ally unless I've taken time to actually hear him.
Mm.
And look at him. Has to be face to face.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
And a lot of guys won't tell their wives, yeah, I this is what I need. This is where I need help. A lot of men won't say that,
Mm-hmm.
but really some will, but I'm very convinced that they certainly will not say it to a person that they don't feel um, like that person is there for them.
Right.
Mm.
Right. I used to, and I mean, when I say used to, I mean just recently, would watch my
Like
parents,
yesterday.
like last time I was around my parents. I've always been amazed at their ability to stay. You know, my mom will sit right next to my dad to watch TV. You know, if I mean, that's what I see. And they, the intimacy doesn't, the intimacy is apparent It's
Yeah.
there. It's not, it's I can't do this life without you. And I was jealous of that for a very, very, very long time because I thought I'm not going to have that in the end of my life, in my older years, in my marriage. I'm not going to. And I do feel like I am going to now because of the changes that we've made. But I'm curious, as you've, you know, since you've written this book and have been exposed to, I'm sure, many, many, many people, how I know you talked about the statistics, but how many people have come to you with that same type of a story of what I'm referring to? You know, that if I didn't make that change, if we didn't work harder to be better together, we would have lost everything that we had built.
Yeah, thank you. Um, yes, there have been people who have said, um, we really worked hard to make our marriage better, and I've heard that. But I will also say I've heard the other side
Yeah.
too, where women have said it just wasn't working anymore,
Mm,
and I just couldn't get there.
mm,
And maybe in some ways, and I haven't really thought through this, but I'm just going to say it. Maybe in some ways, by the time you get there, you're just tired,
yes. Hmm. Uh-huh.
and you just don't know, do I have do I have the physical strength, the emotional strength, even the spiritual strength to try to get there again?
Mm,
And so I'm so thankful, Heidi, for your testimony that you took someone's word to you, guidance to you, and you employed it for a for a good, for this beautiful good.
mhm,
I'm really proud of you
mm,
that
thanks.
that you did that, because that took intentionality and labor, and it was a risk,
Mhm,
you know.
mhm,
So I'm going to risk trying to love this person again.
right.
Um, and maybe it won't work out, but I'm going to risk it in obedience to what I believe God's calling me to do. So I'm really proud of you.
Thanks. It's been hard.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be hard though. And that's where I think your book would be so instrumental for women who are in my similar situation, just not knowing who I am without my kids,
Yeah.
or who I am without my church community, or who am I without my familiar, my family relationship. Who am I? And
Right.
and so it goes back to our theology, our identity. I had to remind myself I first and foremost was a daughter of the living God,
Right.
and because of Jesus, the rest of it falls into place. So
Right.
having the I feel like this is just such a tool now that I have that I can share with women, 10 years younger than me. Please, please, please listen and read and
Yeah.
learn and prepare, because it's critical.
Yes.
Yeah, and I have to add my words, my pride to you.
Hmm.
Here we go with the tears. But to say I'm proud of Heidi and Greg for what they've done, because their children are seeing it all and it's making a difference in their lives. And so I'm so grateful to the voices that spoke into your life, Heidi, and that the Holy Spirit turned your heart toward Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. It's not about us.
Mm-mm.
And we don't like to hear that.
No.
We don't like to
Right.
hear, it's not about you. It isn't. it is when it comes to knowing Jesus. And I think I want to go back to that.
Mm-hmm.
You referenced it, Heidi, that sometimes we take a lot for granted about people that are listening, that, we talk about God and our Father. It's possible you don't know Jesus.
That's
You
right.
don't know anything about you know Jesus, but you've bought in to a worldview that is not about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
You've bought into a worldview that is about self and what's good for me. And listen, all three of us would say we know there are places where you have to get out. We know that. We
Absolutely.
know that there's abuse and there's
Absolutely.
horrible things, and none of us would say, but you need to bow down and submit
Right.
and obey and all that. We would not say that. And I want you to be very sure that you understand that about what we're saying. But the bigger picture is, do you know Jesus? And it's possible you knew him a long time ago and you've lost that connection with him. And we would be so privileged to share with you what it means to love Jesus and to know him. And I think you can hear that all three of us would say to you that, we've been through rocky roads
Mm-hmm.
in different places. Things that some of you may not know, that we lost our 16-year-old son in a fatal car accident. That threw everything I believed on the table. I get it. I get the struggle, and so does Heidi, and so does Elyse. So please know that we want to tell you about Jesus, and that's the starting point, is knowing Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so grateful for what Elyse and Heidi are sharing so transparently and so beautifully. Um, I do want to ask a question, Elyse, about that divestiture, letting go, and then the coming back.
Mm.
When your kids leave, or they never leave, or they come back. And listen, we're in a culture where I've talked to parents who said, I don't think my kids can make it on their own financially. They want
Exactly.
to. They don't want to live here.
Right.
They don't want to be here. They want to be grown-ups. They want to be out.
Right.
But they have to come back. I mean, or they never leave
Yeah.
because they have no way of financially taking care of themselves. So you touched on that, about that divestiture and leaving, and you've been through it. How did you handle that? Give us some tips, some real quick tips.
Yes, thanks. Um, s- when the kids come back, you and your husband, if you're married, need to think very clearly about what are the parameters around which you welcome them back,
Mm,
or even if they never leave. So if a child is an adult, then that changes the way that you interact with them, and you treat them now as adults. You're an adult now. And so I think that for some people, I mean, if a kid's coming back and maybe they've just gone through something really difficult, or they're, in between jobs, or just finished school and now they have to find a job and they need a place to crash for 4 or 5 months or 6 months or something, that's very different. and
mm,
and you should have sort of parameters around that, like, yes, this is still our house,
mm,
and the primary relationships here are between myself and my husband, if I'm married. So, yeah, this is still our house, and these are the rules. Anytime you live anywhere,
And
there are rules
mm-hmm.
of, if you're going to live in, an apartment building, these are the places you can park, these are the things you can do. Okay, so it's very wise to say, all right, if it looks like this person's going to be with us for, more than just a few months, then this is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
These are the rules.
mm,
And if a child is unable to live out on their own, which I completely understand, I live in Southern California.
mm,
That's kind of a joke about living out on your own.
mm,
Then, okay, fine. These are the rules that we have to agree about. And maybe you charge rent, depending, of course, upon the reason the child's there. You will have rules about what we allow. You know, we don't want you coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mm,
Not because I'm trying to tell you how to live, but because you're going to wake me up.
mm, mm,
And so we're not going to, we will have rules, and the rules will be agreed upon.
mm,
And there will also be agreed upon consequences if the rules aren't honored.
mm,
Okay. So I'm not, I think we need to, in one sense, change our perspective, which is not like, okay, I'm the mom and I'm making the rules. The perspective now is you're an adult and I expect you to act like an adult,
mm,
which means that there are certain ways that we want you to be in the home. And if you don't want to do those things, then you don't have to live here.
mm. Yeah. There's a more in the book. We want this conversation to be like salty peanuts, and I think clearly from the things that Heidi has said, and now it's like salty peanuts. There's so much more
Mhm.
for you in the afternoon of life. So we're going to leave that there, and I would like to move on to something that I think does hit the midlife, the afternoon of life, and that's regrets.
Mm.
Yeah.
How do you deal with regrets?
Mm.
You saw the face I made when you said the word
Yeah.
regrets.
It's a big question, and I know that we should have a whole podcast on regrets. I know that, but I just want to touch on it because I do think
Yeah.
it is something that begins. I think it begins. It really starts beginning there.
Yes.
Um, so,
Yes.
so three easy steps on dealing with
Three easy steps to get over your regrets. Okay. Repentance
mm,
and confession.
Yeah.
mm,
Yes.
Two
And
easy steps.
forgiveness.
Forgiveness,
mm,
right?
Forgiving yourself.
So if I don't know anyone. I think it's impossible to go through life if you are self-aware at all
mm,
without saying, "Ah, I really blew that there. I did that wrong. I should not have said that. We should not have had that rule." I
mm,
mean, over and over again, the regrets. So all of us have them. Let's just learn to be honest about them.
Mm.
mm,
Okay. I can't go back and change the things I did a decade ago or
mm,
yesterday.
Mm.
I can't change what's already happened.
mm,
But what I can do is be honest and transparent enough that I say to those that I may have harmed, please forgive me.
mm,
I'm sorry. But you see the only way we can get there, and here we're going to talk about Jesus,
mm,
right? The only way that you can get to a place where you are confident enough in your identity and who you are that you can actually be transparent about your failings is when you understand how massively loved you are.
Mm.
mm,
See, so the fact that I am dearly beloved, completely forgiven,
mm,
and counted completely righteous, and
mm,
that I've been adopted by a loving Heavenly Father, those things tell me that then I no longer have to fight to prove that I'm really okay after all.
Mm.
mm,
Mm.
So God knows me, and yet He loves me.
Mm.
And because of that, then I can be honest about my failings.
mm,
I can be transparent. And it's the most amazing thing when you really welcome Jesus Christ, who knows you and loves you and forgives you and calls you his own, when you welcome him into your life, then you don't need to try to defend your own reputation
Mm.
or say, I don't do anything wrong. Now, I want to back that bus up for just 1 second, because there are probably people who are listening to this who are in abusive situations. I'm not talking about that.
Right.
And actually, if a person is in an abusive situation, what Jesus Christ will do for you is
Mm.
help you become strong enough to call it out and or leave.
Yep. Yep.
But for me, the love of God in Jesus Christ has freed me
Mm.
from my incessant desire to avoid saying I'm sorry.
Mm.
I don't need to do that, because you know what? Jesus has already said the cross has said about me everything that needed to be said,
Mm.
which is I deserve the cross myself, but someone went there for me because I'm loved. Therefore, um, yeah, of course, I have regrets. And when I feel that sorrow in my own soul, when I feel that because of the ways I've failed, then without being cavalier at all about the ways that I've failed, I can say, yeah, that's what I am.
Mm.
As our friend Tim Keller used to say,
Mm.
more
Mm.
sinful and flawed than I ever dared believe.
Mm.
I'm more loved and welcome than I ever dared hope.
Mm. That's beautiful.
So then I can say, yeah, I have regrets. And some of the things I did were heinous.
Mm.
And I have to just keep going back to the cross all
Mm.
the time and saying, Lord, thank you that you have forgiven me.
Mm.
And then confess it to
Yeah.
the person.
Yeah. Okay, editor, hang on with me for a minute here. All right. There's a couple of places in this interview where we could end it beautifully. I mean, really beautifully. So we might rearrange some of those things, like that moment, Elyse. We could just end it right there. But I don't want to miss the opportunity to kind of pull in a few things maybe that we want, if you don't mind, if we
I
take a
don't
few more
mind.
minutes. Okay. Heidi, is there anything that you're thinking, man, I really wanted to ask her this or talk to her about this? And I would like to mention unbelieving children
That's
and grandchildren.
yeah.
I mean, I feel like that is so critical in this culture. It's 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 so big. So I would like to touch on that for a minute, and then of course refer them. I don't expect you to tell us the whole book, but Heidi, is there anything that you would say, man, I'm going to regret not saying this, talking about this? Elise, thank you for your patience. I
Sure,
appreciate
of
it. I
course,
just
of
feel like we're
course.
kind of on holy ground in a way. I'm
Well,
loving
whenever
it.
you talk about Jesus,
You are.
you are,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
Yes, you are.
I think that I agree. I would like to talk about uh, the unbelieving child.
So, do you want to just ask that question as though it's part of our conversation,
Sure.
Heidi? Okay.
Uh, but hold on.
Okay.
um, okay. What is the parenting prosperity gospel, and why is it dangerous?
oh,
Mm.
I love that question.
Mhm.
um, the parenting prosperity gospel is, if you parent in this particular way, whatever that happens to be, whatever the parenting advice du jour is, whether it's gentle parenting or being a trad wife or whatever, there I can't keep up with it at all. It's
Mhm.
the same thing over and over again.
Mhm.
But the prosperity gospel is, if you train your child in the way he should go,
Mhm.
as though that's a promise, which it's not.
Mhm.
It's not a promise. If you train your child in this particular way, then your child will be this, will turn out the way you want him or her to turn out.
Mhm.
And I'll give one of my other books a plug. We Jessica Thompson, my daughter, and I wrote a book entitled "Give Them Grace," in which we really talk about this sort of prosperity gospel, which is good parenting in, good kids out.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So the problem, of course, with that
Mhm.
is there is no promise that somehow you can shape another person's soul.
Mhm.
You can't do that.
Mhm.
Only God can do that. So I want to be a faithful parent. I want to try to raise my child in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. I want to try to do that as faithfully as I can, all of the time understanding that salvation belongs to the Lord.
Mhm.
And I can't save anybody. And see, that'll go back to what we were talking about. I'll rephrase that in case we do this in a different order. And then that speaks to regret, because if our child turns out to walk away from the things that we value highly, then, we have all this regret about, maybe I wasn't the right parent. It's a
Mhm.
terrible, terrible burden
Yep.
that has been placed upon parents, that somehow they think if they parent correctly or even faithfully, that somehow their children will serve Christ.
Mhm.
Listen,
Mhm.
I can't do that. I don't have the power to do that. And that's a crushing burden that's that so many parents, as I've spoken to parents about this very topic, so many of them just come to me weeping,
Yeah.
weeping, moms just weeping and saying to me, I thought if I homeschooled my kid, I thought if I did this, if I did that, and I'm not speaking against homeschooling, I
Mhm.
homeschool. If I did these things, then my children would be this. And um I no. it,
Mhm.
it doesn't work like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the really terrible statistic is that something like 80% of kids who are raised in a Christian home leave the faith as soon as they leave the home.
That's that's devastating.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what we have to understand is the way that perhaps I laid down the law, over and over and over again. You got to do all these things, trying, of course, to assure myself that I was doing it all right.
Mm.
Um, that will crush a parent, and it will also push a child away.
Mm.
So, we have unbelieving children. I personally have unbelieving grandchildren.
Mm.
And they're none of them young now. They're all adults.
Mm.
And so I say, all right, well, how do I respond to them?
Mm.
I love them.
Mhm.
You know, the reality is they don't need me to tell them that the ways that they are choosing to live
Mhm.
uh, are not good or right. They don't need me to say that. They have already heard it. What they need is to know that at my house they have an open door and a welcome, and they can always come to Mimi if they need help. That's what they need from me.
Yeah.
My dad told me while at a time where I was really struggling about my children and if things I had done and things I had and my lack of faith, my crisis of faith had affected my children's faith. And he said, God doesn't have grandchildren. God has children. And your children will not be saved because you're saved. And
Right. Good.
that was another one of those moments of, I mean, it doesn't mean I don't struggle with it still every single day. And I'm not on my knees begging God for their salvation.
Right.
But God doesn't look at me and see my mistakes anymore. So, you know, my kids have to, wherever they are in their faith, they have to figure that out. That's between them and their maker, you know? So it is, but my door is always open. At the same, just like you said, I think that is so, it's something Mom and I have talked about many, many times. You have to enter it with, if you don't walk their life with them, they will leave you behind.
And another thing that our theology teaches us, and you talked about it, Elyse, is the Holy Spirit is who changes hearts.
That's right.
Right.
And that's freeing.
Yes.
That's really freeing that, okay, it's not up to me to change hearts. It's up to me to set the table
Right.
and invite them to come. And I like to say, invite them to come and taste and see that the Lord is good.
Right.
And you can do that without a lot of words,
Right.
that saying the things that they think you're going to say, surprise them with how you are setting a table without even mentioning the name of Jesus, that you want them. They know what you believe, and they know your passion. And I also go back to the prayer of Moses about the Israelites, where it's almost like he's really mad at God, and he says, "These are your children. Look at the way
It's
they're
like,
behaving.
Fix
they're
They're
them.
your
your kids.
kids." Yeah. So, and I have to admit, I've prayed that more than once. These are your covenant children. Come on, send your Holy Spirit. And so I think that's the relief. We need the freedom to know that he's, you know, just everything you guys have said.
Yeah.
I think it's really beautiful. Um, Elyse, we're wrapping up and I can't stand it. I don't want to wrap up. I feel like we could go to a coffee shop and sit there for hours and not be
That's
finished. And I wish we could come out to California and do that. So, but I think you have spoken to that woman who is really struggling with aging, but I would like to us wrap up and just if you would just speak to that one woman, because around here we talk about we want to share the light of Christ with that one more person who is in desperate need of knowing Jesus. If you could just talk to her for a minute and encourage her, and where can she find wisdom and hope for this journey that right now she just wants to get out of?
Yeah. Thank you, Sharon. Here's the reality. All of us want to live long lives, but it's impossible to live a long life and not suffer,
Mm.
not have things taken away. And so, what I want to say to that person is this: you're not alone. I want to, I want to just remember a woman from the Old Testament whose name was Hagar.
Mm.
And she was a woman, without going into the whole story, but she was unwed. She was pregnant. She was a slave. She had nothing. And she sat down one day by a well and thought, that's where she was going to die. And you know who came up? Jesus. The Bible says that the angel of the Lord came to her and basically said, I see you. This is the plan. And so she responded. She's actually the first person in the Bible who gives a name to God. She responds and she says, you are the God who sees me. And sometimes to that we could say, oh, yeah, well, if you see me, why don't you do something? To which I would respond, he's loving and he's wise and he is working so many times in ways that we cannot see. But he sees us. And so then I would invite that woman to be perhaps even like another woman at a well to whom Jesus revealed himself. Just know that he sees you and that he loves you and that he's there for you. Call out to him. And he will never, ever turn his back on you. Never.
Elyse, thank you so much for sharing your heart with us. This has been really such a sweet time with you. And we're so grateful for Jesus giving you a story that is designed to give hope to others. And again, I'm so grateful. And Heidi and I both, I know we're going to be talking about this for a long time, this conversation. And friends, I hope that you'll be talking about it. I hope that as you listen, perhaps this was just for you, but maybe there's a friend who you're thinking, oh my goodness, I wish she could hear this. Well, she can. You can share this message with her, share this podcast. This is how we spread the word about these resources. This is a tiny organization, but you can help expand this to around the world by sharing this conversation with Elyse, and you will not know until heaven whose heart has been touched because you took the moment to share it. And so I hope you will. You can go to markinc.org, that's markinc.org, where you're going to find more stories like the one we've talked about today, more topics, resources that are free, that are designed to help turn your heart toward Jesus. And that's markinc.org. I'm Sharon Betters, and this has been the Help and Hope podcast with my co-host Heidi Nequist, and our guest Elyse Fitzpatrick. Check out the show notes where we are going to share with you links to Elyse's books and podcast and so much more. And remember, this is salty peanuts. So you want more. Go out and order The Afternoon of Life right now. I know you won't regret it. I can't wait to be with you again. We look forward to more conversations like this. Thank you so much for listening.